Hello everybody and welcome back for another episode of Indie Impressions. My name is Nick and today we're going to be checking out another game from the 7-Day FPS 2014 Game Jam. This is Porapora by developer Flex Roman with art and sound by Heloise Lozano, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced either of your names there, but this is another first-person sort of nature stroll type game. I know I cover a lot of these. In fact, I only just the other day was sort of facetiously tweeting how to get your game covered on Indie Impressions: 1, glowing forest; 2, cats; 3, mushrooms; 4, flashing geometry; and 5, psychedelic colors. So yeah, despite the joke, there is a little kernel of truth to that, I'm pretty sure. I definitely like games with some sort of a nature theme or explorations of visuals with interesting auditory components, and that's what this is. Porapora is going to have us walking through an auditory forest. As we run into things, it will actually trigger little audio sequences that'll kind of blend together in a neat and hopefully interesting way. At least that's what I'm looking forward to seeing, and I haven't really played hardly any of this. It was a almost completely blind episode, and aside from audio levels, I am looking forward to seeing what kind of combinations of sound we can trigger here. So let's let our journey begin and hopefully find some cool stuff. So one thing that immediately came to mind, well, aside from the fact that this is a Game Maker game and I can't actually look up and down, which is maybe a little bit of a negative, but the kind of construction paper cutout look of this game is really fascinating to me. And taking that, combine that with the whole fact that, like, we've got this little bit of forest that almost seems procedurally generated. I'm not 100% sure if it is, but it might as well be, considering there aren't really a lot of landmarks that we can see. So we've got some chimes, we've got tones, we've got discordant, percussive elements. I'm just trying to see if, like, specific trees always trigger the same sound, or what. This one doesn't need to be doing anything. Also, what triggers the sounds to go off? Is it stepping into the shadow, or is it running into the actual... Okay, it's running into the actual tree itself, it seems. It used to cause the whole thing to wiggle quite a bit, too. I don't know if there's just, like, wind blowing through everything, but it feels like it. Wow, that's mysterious. It's like equal parts discordant and harmonious, which is strange to experience from a forest. Usually forests are so upbeat and good-natured. This one's almost stoic and kind of confusing and maybe a little bit scary at times. Although I guess you could say the same of just about any actual forest you maybe have ever wandered through. Really enjoying the art style, though, to this. I think it would be very cool to see some structures actually made out of this similar art style. I mean, you've got these, like, I guess these are sort of an analog to a birch, but then we've also got this variety of different seasons that we seem to be in, too. Where we've got some green leaves here, some orange leaves there, some red bushes over here, perhaps some flowers. Seems like a lot of them are triggering a similar sound effect. Oh. Okay, now I'm actually trying to hit a bunch of them at the same time, and it seems like we're getting a big kind of cacophony of jazz hits out of nowhere. Hopefully the audio levels came out just right. I did take a minute to try and find the right spot for it, but it does seem like maybe things jump around a little bit depending on how many triggers I'm running into at the time. It is also reminding me a little bit of LSD Dream Emulator in a way, obviously minus the high degree of surreal content. This is mostly, you know, nature-based, good-natured, cartoony style stuff, but LSD Dream Emulator had a thing where you'd walk along these tiled surfaces, and every tile you walk on would have its own sound effect that triggered. In this case, we've got these little circles of foliage or leaves that have fallen, and they all seem to have their own trigger as well. So let's see if I walk over the set of leaves here. Oh, got like a jittering camera view. Yeah, it almost seems like anything I walk over is just drawing from a pool of random samples, and then the more things I trigger, the more random samples trigger at the same time, which maybe is the way it works. I'm not 100% sure. But I'd really love to see it if maybe every type of tree or every area in the forest had its own sort of vibration or tonality, and as you walk through them, they sort of trigger in a way that would slowly add up to adding some pads to the background that would eventually build sort of an orchestral arrangement around the tones of the places you've seen. So I'm thinking, like, you walk through, you know, the springtime thing, it's the youth segment of the forest, as it were, and things are very cheerful, very upbeat, very hopeful. And, you know, that sort of adds that little element, and then maybe you end up in the summer area where things are more strong and vibrant, and that gives you a little bit of, like, a more epic overtone to things, and then eventually you find your way over to fall, and maybe the springtime area sort of starts to fade out a little bit. And obviously this doesn't have to proceed through the sequence of seasons, but it just seems like kind of the natural thing that happens with foresty kind of games in general. I mean, look at Proteus. It works out very well for them. And again, I'm not sure if this is procedural or not, but if it happens to be, I think that could actually have some cool, consequences as well. If we have the ability to take this at our own pace in a nonlinear fashion, we could almost use the forest as a trigger or a sequencer of sort to create an arrangement that we find personally pleasing based on, the areas that produce the tones that they do. Maybe you find an area that's rich and, has a whole bunch of bushes with little happy birds in them, and that adds sort of a, twittery kind of fleeting happy tone there, is a little, adding some whistling sounds, or, well, I think you get the idea. It's a lot of different things you can draw from in terms of sound to go with nature. I mean, this is kind of the formation of a lot of the ideas that we get in media now. They all sort of have a root in nature one way or another, if you, trace them back far enough. And I think that's a kind of a cool thing that I've seen done in a lot of Japanese media. They always seem to have this fascination with nature, and I think that's a kind of a thing we've maybe gotten a little bit out of touch with to some degree lately. And it's nice to see that represented on occasion, and, well, maybe I sort of represent it disproportionately to a large degree on my channel, but I find it just really kind of a happy distraction at times to be able to enjoy a whimsical reimagination of the things that we can experience on a day-to-day basis. And I don't mean to, like, deify nature or put it up too high on a pedestal. I mean, not trying to put it down either. It is what it is. But it is kind of neat to see it shown in a digital representation where things are still up for more interpretation. We don't entirely understand the laws and the physics of the scenario that we find ourselves in, and especially when it puts us in this sort of ethereal dreamscape like this, where we don't know what we might run into. I mean, that's sort of the premise behind survivalism, right? Like, there's always this experience of wonder, whether or not that's, maybe one day you have an extremely bad experience, you end up getting injured, another day you have a windfall of good fortune and you find an extra food source or a great place to live. Like, that's the bounty that is the world that we live in, and it's kind of neat to see that represented in an environment where the consequences are not quite as dire as life and death, I guess is kind of where I'm going with that. And I think that's kind of the nature of what we do in video games, right? There's so much time that we can experience these pros and cons without any of the negative elements to it. It's all just sort of experimental, and it's all for fun. And I don't know, I've gotten down a very, very deep rabbit hole here, but these are the kind of things that trigger in my mind when I think about nature in video games, and it's a thing I think about pretty frequently, actually. So it looks like we've kind of gotten into a bit of a loop here with Porapora. Unfortunately, there's not that many things to see. I was really hoping there might be more areas or maybe more themes or more triggers that we might run into, but I definitely like the theme of it, and I like the feeling of it in general. Sometimes nature can be happy, sometimes it can be a little scary, and I think that's kind of represented well here in Porapora. So if you'd like to give this a download yourself, you can feel free. There will be a link, of course, in the description, as there always is with every episode of Indie Impressions. You can also feel free to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed what you saw here or what we talked about, and I'd definitely love to continue the conversation in the comments. So if you heard anything in there that you were particularly interested in, feel free to chime in there as well. I'm also very interested that you can create things like this in Game Maker. This is what I would have imagined to be more of a Unity engine style thing, but the developers did well here to do this in that engine, and maybe I need to look into this a little bit more, because Game Maker seems like it's gotten a little bit more backbone in the 3D elements lately, so I'm gonna have to check that out on my own time. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching. As always, make sure you come back again tomorrow for another episode of Indie Impressions. Go up every single day. Look forward to bringing you a whole bunch more. Hope you enjoyed the discussion, and I will see you all tomorrow.